Hello, hello, hello. Happy November. Welcome. It feels like July, but it is officially November. I know, I was surprised too when I walked out this morning and immediately began to sweat due to the humidity and ridiculous weather we are experiencing. But nonetheless, c'est la vie. Let's enjoy it while we got it. Got a fun lineup this week. Having a little fun with I wouldn't call it a play on words, but we're having a little fun. The classic GSM blend. We're going to break it down. We're going to have them separately. So what is a GSM blend? It is a classic red blend inspired and based off of like the traditional red blends of the Southern Rhone. GSM standing for Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre. But today we're going to have them all separately. We're going to kick it off, this week here at Second Glass for the wine flights. Going to start out little La Marea Grenache from the Central Coast. Roll into good buddy Sashi Mormon, his Piedrasassi Syrah from Santa Barbara. And then rounding it out with TimePlace Mourvèdre from Lodi. And I'm going to suggest this because I think it's fun and I don't think people might think to do it, but I think it would be interesting to see what people think of it, is come in, have the flight, taste them all as they are, and then sort of maybe leave a little bit in each one of your glasses of each wine, and then blend them together for your own, personal creation of GSM, and see what you think. See if you like it as a blend or by themselves. Personally, I like both. There's no right or wrong. So let's get into it. La Marea, these guys, so based in the Central Coast, this is Ian Brand. Really amazing, bootstrapped his winery. He works incredibly hard. He has 3 separate labels, all under the I Brand winery. So he has an I Brand where he really focuses in on Cabernet Franc and more classic traditional, French varieties grown in the Central Coast. He does some Chenin Blanc. I believe he does a couple other things, but primarily Cab Franc and Chenin, I think is what he's known for under that label. And then he has La Marea, which is another little label where he does Spanish-inspired varieties from way out on the coast, very close to the ocean. He does an Albarino that's spectacular, and then he does this lovely little, crunchy Grenache. I mean, look at that color. So pretty, so light, so delicate. And then he's got another label called Les Petits Paysans, which is the little farmer. And that's kind of his, ode to bistro, everyday value wines, where he does Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. I think he does a red blend. He does a Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blend, GSM. Who would have thought? And a couple of other things. But we are talking La Marea and we're talking Grenache. So Grenache, although the French would probably dispute this, I think most people have agreed that Grenache probably was originally from Spain and had made its way to France via Spain. It's planted throughout the Mediterranean. In the Southern Rhone, it really takes hold in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and in the wines of Gigondas and Baccarat and all of those other amazing places that no one knows how to pronounce correctly, even myself. And then it's pretty prominent throughout the Mediterranean, more further south down into the Languedoc and a little bit in Provence, but really not too much. It can handle heat really well, but it gets a little too humid down there for them. There's a ton of it planted in Sardinia, where it's called Cannonau, and then all throughout the eastern side of Spain, and it can make a range of wines. Grenache, people always like to say, and I agree with this, Grenache does that thing that everyone wants Pinot Noir to do. It's much hardier than Pinot Noir, so it's easier to grow, which is nice. It can be very delicate. I mean, again, look, that color is crazy. It is ruby translucent. Delicate, perfumed, aromatic. It has great acidity, can hold up to a lot of things, but mainly it is very heat resistant for the most part, so it can handle that. The downside is that if you let it get too ripe, it can go really, really jammy, which a lot of people like. There's a lot of Spanish, a lot of California wines, even Southern French wines that have that bigger, richer, more jam fruit-driven style. But as in the last decade or so, we've seen a big resurgence of this style of Grenache, known as Grenache in Spain. It's lighter, fresher, and drinks a little more akin to a Pinot Noir as opposed to some of the fuller bodied Grenache, which felt more like they were trying to be Cabernet, even though Grenache doesn't have nearly the tannic structure of Cabernet. So let's get into this after my ramble there. So, wow. It is like bright red cherries. I mean, almost like Jolly Rancher cherry. Like, I mean, it smells like a Jolly Rancher cherry. I know this wine is not going to be sugar sweet like a Jolly Rancher, but like the aroma of smelling Jolly Rancher cherry. Some strawberry. And there's always, for me, this really pretty thing that I always find in like Grenache done in this style of like this kind of like burnt orange citrus, like what do I want to say? Citrus zest. Wow, apparently I can't talk today. That stands out, that I find so appealing in these wines, and this has this for days. Tons of freshness, great acidity here. Subtle nuances. There's a little bit of, you can tell it was done in some concrete or oak. I can't remember the breakdown for him. And that's more of a textural thing, not a flavor profile. You just get a little richness and some weight on the back end. The alcohol in this is 14%, which is pretty average for Grenache. Again, like I said, it handles heat well, it ripens really well, and it can go crazy ripe. I think most Grenache that I think, the wine community, as it were, likes to look for typically fall between that 13.5 to 14. I've had them as low as like 12.5. And they still tasted good. I mean, the key there to remember is a balanced palate. Still has to taste delicious. Like, being low alcohol for the sake of being low alcohol is not always a good thing. There's a reason that you go to a certain alcohol level, and that's the great, maybe alcohol-wise it's at the level you want it to be, but the fruit characters are not ripe, and the seeds aren't ripe. So you're going to get a bitter, astringent, out-of-balance wine. And this is beautifully balanced. A little shrub brush, the classic Southern Rhone Garrigue, which you'll find in all three of these varieties, kind of rosemary, thyme, lavender, a little bit of sage, although a little less of that than the more intense flavors. Spectacular. Again, that is La Marea Grenache from the Central Coast. That's the 2019 vintage. Moving into Syrah. I think, for me, there are a lot of great California Syrahs. For whatever reason, the wines that Sashi's putting out at Piedrasassi just really hit me in the right way, and I think they're some of the best out there. So this is the Piedrasassi, his PS. It's his entry level. It's a blend of different vineyard sites that he works with, that he also makes single site Syrah from. But the PS is kind of his everyday bottling. I've always loved these bottles. I believe I asked him once why he put them in these bottles, and I think the answer was he just wanted to do something different. I don't think there was like a specific. But he puts all of his wine in these bottles, including, I believe he puts his olive oil. He also makes olive oil. He makes red wine vinegar. They have a bakery under the Piedrasassi name that is really run by his wife, and his daughter is very involved. They have heritage grains that they grow, that they make bread with. I mean, he is a Renaissance man to the T. I would love to sit down with him. I've never met him in person. I've only talked to him via Zoom and things of that nature, but he is utterly fascinating, and I think he makes great wine. So Celeste and William here at Second to Last also agree that this Syrah is excellent. They have poured it by the glass for the last 2 years, whenever they can have it. And it represents, again, like I was saying with the Grenache, that lighter, fresher, more nuanced style. Again, nothing against the fuller bodied styles, but sometimes that can be overwhelming for people. And this is definitely a ode to the Northern Rhone, Côte Rôtie, Crozes Hermitage. I'd say more Côte Rôtie and Cornasson style than like a Hermitage or a Crozes Hermitage. Lacks a little bit of that intensity of structure and meatiness. This is more on that savory, olives and kind of, again, fresh, soft, green herbs. I mean, right out of the gate, on the nose, it is, olive tapenade, Kalamata olives, a little bit of that like smoky meat character. Some blackberry, a little bit of plum. Oh, so good. Wow. Again, not a super dark wine, but definitely a bit more color, a little bit more depth, more of that purple color that we would expect from Syrah. You know, again, not that it's important, but this is coming in at about 12.4. So pretty drastically different on the alcohol level. Excuse me. But not necessarily like, do I feel like one is more alcoholic than the other? But you can see, and one of the things I hope that people see when you come in and have the flight, and I really, really hope everyone does, because I think this is a fun flight to think about, because I think GSM blends are very common. Most people know what they are, but few ever really think about like why that blend works. And when you taste these three varieties separately like this, and then hopefully some of you like blend them together in your own blend at the end of your glasses, because I think that would be super fun. You can see where Grenache is really bringing some high-toned fruit, lots of freshness, aromatics. Syrah brings like this savory textural element, a little bit of color that makes it really pretty. I mean, Syrah kind of makes up the mid palate, I feel like. Again, lovely freshness, great finish. That one is super tasty. So happy with that. Again, Piedrasassi, the PS Syrah from Santa Barbara County. That's the 2020 vintage. All right, and then rolling into our good buddy over at TimePlace, their Mourvèdre from Lodi. Now, don't go thinking negatively about Lodi. I know everyone has an opinion. You know, we all do. None of them are wrong. None of them are necessarily entirely right. But Lodi has had a long stretch of history of being misunderstood. And finally, people are paying attention and making incredible wines that don't all taste the same from some really old, amazing sites in Lodi. So, TimePlace, Mourvèdre. And this is, I mean, again, we're going back to that color thing, much darker, a lot more opaque. Still has some ruby tinges to it, but you can see where this would really back up that Syrah and give that big depth of color. And on the nose, Mourvèdre is even more full throttle, more meaty, more savory. It's got more structure than both Syrah and Grenache. So you're really like, as far as a GSM blend goes, you're really focusing in on that like freshness from Grenache, savory delicacy from Syrah. Syrah can also bring a lot of like violet and floral characteristics, and Mourvèdre kind of comes in with like the action-packed, like full throttle, lots of like tannic structure without being overwhelming necessarily. This is more like blackberry, a little bit of raspberry. Definitely more, you can, to me it smells a little like more fruit driven and less savory, and definitely on that like purple black fruit characteristic. Yeah. Oh, coming in like great, like peppery, smoky notes on the finish, a little more of that meatiness, definitely more tannins. Again, not super heavy in tannins, but much higher so than the Grenache and the Syrah. The acidity in the Mourvèdre is a little lower than the first two. So what you're really getting here is like a textural element. So again, super fun lineup. I don't really know what else to say here. I think it's a really fun thing to think about, and for anybody who is familiar with GSMs or has drank them in the past or really loves Rhone, I think this is a fun flight to come in, grab some food, taste through these, bring some friends, because I think it'd be a fun conversation if you want to be nerdy like me. There's nothing wrong with that. And kind of just walk through, because they do stand out very differently, you know, from the Marea Grenache, again, being really high-toned, fresh, vibrant, you know, that ruby color, into this very savory, like silky textured Syrah, and then finishing with a much more structured but not overwhelming kind of meaty, peppery Mourvèdre. Yeah, come in, have some flights, stay safe, Stay cool, because apparently summer's never ending around here. And I will see you guys next week.